is
Yeah.
true doing that.
Yeah.
I really don't remember many of my third graders doing that
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay.
There's other ways to get them to track too. If they're struggling, say like in a nonfiction text, and it gets sort of wordy, instead of having them do this, if they're still having problems finding that return sweet when they go back, it's taking the finger this way and tracking this way next. You see what I'm saying?
Just doing the whole line.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
That doesn't interrupt the phrasing and the flow of the sentence that pointing one word at a time
That
does.
choppiness. Yes.
All right, so I wanted to come back to this too, Jill. I got ahead of myself, I told you that. Y'all are getting these, okay? I think you may remember mentioning a little bit about prompting guides. And so they've ordered them, they're just, haven't come from Heidemann yet.
Okay.
But I wanted to go ahead and show you today how you could use this when it comes in, okay? So you had talked about read with appropriate stress. So in this particular one, part one is about oral reading. So I can come right here, and this little gray box here, it is my table of contents. When I go down, when you think of stress, you think of fluency, right? Okay, so I'm going down to the big heading of fluency, and there is stress, and it says 18. When I come here, the odd numbers are on the front, the even numbers are on the back, there's 18. I pull it over, and it gives me here from stress. It tells me that if it's something the kids can't do with my prompting, then here's some teaching points I could use. If I need to come up with some words for prompting to say to them, here's some words I can use. If it's something that I've noticed that they're doing, I want to reinforce because it's something we're working on. Does that make sense? So normally what I do is in my planning, if that's a thing that I feel like I don't have the right ideas on how to teach it, or I don't have the ideas on how to prompt it, or even what to say reinforce, okay? Then I'll just open this up, I'll look at it, and I don't try to use everything that's on here, okay? But I begin to think about what I could use. So first, I usually try prompting first.
Okay.
And I might say, try that again and make that word sound important. Or we could say, try that again and say the dark word louder if it's a bolded word, okay? And so I'm thinking we could just use that one.
Okay.
Say that again and make that sound important, that word, all right? If they're still struggling with it, then we come over here to these teaching points. And we could say either listen to how I make my voice sound. How did my voice sound when I said it? Or we could say, listen to how this sounds. You see what I'm saying? So I usually pick one or two of these, just to kind of have in my head. So I know that when I'm going to teach this is language I can use. Does that make sense? And then here is just reinforcing. Because you remember part of being responsive is helping them by either prompting, but not prompting so much that we just keep prompting and prompting. After we prompted a couple of times and they can't do it, we teach them, right? But it's also important to reinforce when they're doing something they're supposed to. Does that kind of help?
Yes.
So don't you think just those, and I think you probably already use those, it's not anything new for you, but there will be some things from time to time that you're thinking about that you'll want to utilize this book and how it can help you. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay, all right. So now to comprehension. You ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So going back again, you wanted them to make the connections between the text and the illustrations, all right? So another rule of thumb that I try to do, okay, is because I try to always do that first bullet again, because in guided reading, you want the kids to be doing all the work. If I'm talking way too much in guided reading, then I'm doing all the work and they're not learning. Does that make sense? Okay. So I try to start out by telling them to share their thinking about the story. And then I'm going to use questions on, well, tell me what made you think that. Or was there something in the book, in a picture or whatever that made you think that? Tell me how that, or why it made you think that. So I try to dig a little deeper to get to see, because what I'm looking for is these boxes here. I'm looking to see when they give me answers, are they giving me answers that are just here within the text? Or are they using some of these others too? Does that make sense? And so that's one of the big pieces that I find that kind of helps me. If I hear crickets,
You won't with this grade.
yeah, but if I did, then I can begin to use some of these questions,
Right, yes, ma'am.
okay? Or, because it's their very first time, I can model what I'm thinking about a little bit of the book,
Okay.
and then let them take over.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So that kind of helps me. But I also want to talk about the connection thing, okay? This has become one of my favorite books. As you can well see, I'm using it a lot. When you go into this book with a level J, and I'm going to pause and give you time to finish up that
Oh,
one.
yeah, no, yes, sir.
When you go into a level J, there's your paragraph, there's this, okay? Then you get to where the comprehension is. Here's the thinking within the text. So it's telling you some things, the actual reading behaviors that we want kids doing underneath those as they're reading it. Now, understand this. Don't let it overwhelm you, because it's not that we're checking it off. But we're looking to see, are they using their vocabulary? If they are within the text, what are some of the things they're doing to use it? Okay? When you get to beyond the text, if they're predicting, are they doing some of these bullets that are here? Are they making connections? Are they using these bullets to help them? If not, these become teachable moments for us within the comprehension. Okay? So, for example, connections. I come here to thinking beyond the text. Okay? Come to making connections. The way the book works is that anything in green should be something they're bringing from prior text.
Okay.
If there's a red bullet, that's new learning for them today, or this in this level, okay? So using prior knowledge to understand the content in a nonfiction text. Well, that doesn't apply to us today. So take a look at some of these connections, bullets, and see if there's anything there we might could use. We don't have to,
Right.
but we might could
Okay.
use.
Well, we've already got the personal experience.
Yes, we do.
Mhm. Haven't read enough yet to get us
Yeah.
a connection between the series.
No.
Definitely background knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, to understand settings.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That one's gonna be good, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Making connections between a text and illustration that supports interpretation, enhances enjoyment, or sets the mood. Okay. So I'm thinking that along that lines, that we go ahead and we prepare in case we need it.
Okay.
Okay? Is that we come now and we find another picture besides the one that we introduced with.
Title.
Yes. Another picture in here that we can help them use and make those connections if they don't show us that. Because we're going to want them to actually turn to some page. Turn to the page that made you think that. Does that make sense? But if they don't, we're prepared already of where we can go.
Okay.
All right?
I think we definitely could do 9.
I was thinking that same thing. I was. Because there's just FYI, there's just so much there. You see what I'm saying? Okay. So what if we just make that as a note for ourselves?
Okay.
That would be a great way that if we need it, that page 9, okay, is where we can go in order to help them begin to make connections in those pictures and using those pictures to understand the story, if they don't show us that in that bullet, that
Okay.
first bullet.
All right.
Does that work?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Any other of those questions that you feel like might be important for those kids?
Well, I think it's just going to sort of flow.
Yeah.
I mean, I really do.
And some of those questions, and this is what I want you to think about, is some of those questions may be totally answered in this part right here.
Mhm.
The questions are there in case we need to encourage more discussion, and they're not giving it.
Okay.
But if they're giving it, then we skip the question.
Okay.
You see what I mean?
Mhm.
Okay.
And I think that's good. What lesson did
Uh-huh.
Mo and Joe need to learn?
Yes. Okay.
And then it relates it back to them too. What did you
Mhm.
learn?
Yeah. Okay.
And then it goes back to the genre.
Uh-huh.
It's probably
Okay.
wrapping it all up, isn't it?
Okay, yeah. And again, it may be that those fall in easily
Okay.
within the conversation, okay?
How long would you say let this last?
I'm gonna say 5,
Okay.
6 minutes.
That's what I was sort of thinking too.
Yeah.
Fairly
Max.
short. Okay.
Mhm. So, let's talk about this part. This part can be where you lead the discussion.
Mhm.
I chime in, and the way I chime in is simply this. I would touch your arm, because I'll be sitting next to you, and I'll say, do you mind if I say something?
Mhm.
That's how I'll chime in.
Okay.
Or I can lead this. What
Okay.
would you rather happen
Would
here?
you mind leading?
I'll
And then
do
I'll
it.
chime in?
That will work.
Is that, would that,
Yeah.
I would just like to see your flow.
Okay,
That's okay?
that's perfect. All right.
Okay.
So I'll lead the discussion part,
Okay.
okay? But I want you, because you know your
Right,
kids
right.
better,
Mhm.
okay? So I want you to chime in as needed.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So let's look at the teaching point now, okay? This teaching point says using for and using information, using multiple sources, okay? Which goes back to the fact that when you read, it has to make sense, sound right, look right. Let's see, it says, go to page 5, the 4th sentence.
That's the stripes.
That's the striped sentence,
Yes, ma'am.
isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Mhm. Okay. Now that they've read it, I'm wondering, because if you look at it and you see the dotted, if they could actually, I don't know, because it doesn't go that way, does it?
It sort of goes a different direction, doesn't it?
That didn't work, did it? Let's see. It doesn't turn to the next picture and think about what would make sense.
Well, it says if they read it, does it sound right?
Right,
Let's paint strips. That's just
Right.
what I keep.
yeah. I think that would be a great teaching point for them, because
Okay.
it's something they need to be aware of
Right.
anyway, don't you agree?
Yes.
All right, and I think that can last 2, maybe 3 minutes, don't you
Okay.
think so? All
Sounds
right,
good.
you feel okay with that one?
Uh-huh. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. One thing I want to tell you about the teaching point, just to help you in this, always use this one right here. If it's what your kids need,
Okay.
okay? But if there's something else that you found in this book that you know based upon the needs of your kids, you can use that too for that teaching point. It doesn't always have to be that exact thing.
Okay. Or like a review too, like
That's
we
right.
were doing dialogue, just
Right.
to touch on it to
Uh-huh.
review. Okay.
Okay? All
Or
right?
sentence structure.
Yeah.
You know, something that we could pull from grammar.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
That was in this book.
Right. Yes.
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 Absolutely. Okay? All right. So turn now and let's look at the word work and the writing about reading, okay? In the phonics and word work part, here's what's important about it, okay? Is that it's not for the kids to have mastery today.
Okay.
It needs to be short, quick, just let them play for a minute with some words, because
Okay.
all you're doing is keeping it to where there is another moment of touching it, so this is sinking in their brain and linking all those pieces together. Does that make sense? So when you think about this, taking 2-part syllable words, okay? basically, we're gonna write the words, and we're going to talk about how we break them apart, right? Okay. Yep.
Would you write them first, or do you, like you were showing us another time, like ladder? Or do we write it
I
first
think
and
at
break it
this
apart?
point, simply because this one is taking those words, and it's their third grade now, and we're wanting to move them, that part a little bit further, does that make sense? We write them.
Okay.
When we're first introducing syllables, we want them to hear the syllables.
Well, they like if we wrote them
Uh-huh.
and then said it and then did that. They really like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
They
That's
really
something
like
they
that.
enjoy, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And they've really done well with that.
Uh-huh.
We've had that skill before.
The big
Something else.
thing is, though, is making sure they understand why and how they break those words apart. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so, yes, they could do that.
Okay.
We just don't want to spend a whole lot of time on
Right.
this.
That's right.
Right?
Okay.
Okay. You feel okay about that
Yes,
part?
ma'am. Mhm. So we just do this on one, like one board. They don't need separate boards or anything like that. Okay.
Not in this case.
Gotcha.
Okay? Because they're just working alongside with you with these.
Okay.
Okay?
Those 3 words. Okay.
And then the writing about reading is an independent writing today.
Okay.
All right? And basically, they're writing a summary, right? Okay. So, writing about reading, if we're not careful, can get skipped because of timing, right? When it's an independent writing like this, if I feel like my kids can go do it at their seats away from me, then I set them up. I give them their reader's notebooks or tell them to take their reader's notebooks out, and I have them do it away from me.
Okay.
Then, when I pull them back the next day, whatever it works in my schedule, then I have them bring their reader's notebook back to the table, and we just kind of glance over and look at what their summary was, and we start.
Now, this would be a different notebook than like their writing journal that
Yeah.
we have for writing.
Yeah.
So this is something
If you
different.
have a reader's notebook, but if you don't
Okay.
have one, don't go
Okay.
get one.
Okay.
Just give them a sheet of paper.
Okay. All right. That's what
Okay.
I'm good with it.
Yeah.
I just didn't know. Okay.
No, don't start something new.
Okay.
Just give them a sheet of paper. That's
Okay.
fine.
Gotcha.
As long as they have something that they can go and write the summary,
Okay.
they can come back. And what I would do the next day is I would have them next day start sharing their summaries with each other,
Okay.
so that every child gets a chance to share their summary. And I'm listening in as they're sharing their summaries in order to hear who's doing pretty good with their summary and who's not.
Okay.
Because that's anecdotal notes right there
That's
for
right.
me.
Okay.
Okay? It's not a teaching moment, just simply who's doing well with a summary, who's not doing well with a summary. And then I'm moving on that next day. How you feel about that?
That's good. Do they always illustrate, or is that just extra?
That can be extra unless, I know that we did in first grade yesterday, they had them actually illustrate first. This one doesn't say they have to illustrate first, okay?
It just says if time allows.
If time allows.
Okay.
So first we want them to write it, and then we can tell them, if you have time before, you can illustrate it. Or if you have something you really want them to do in their station, and they need to finish this and then go to a station and do whatever it is they're doing at center, then have them not draw it.
Okay.
Okay? All right. That good?
Yes, ma'am.
You feel good about the
I'm a
lesson?
little nervous, but yes.
I got your back.
Gotcha.
Got
Yes,
it?
ma'am.
Okay. All right, we're out of the fishbowl, so very quickly, because it went a little bit longer. Planning like this does not last this long when I'm doing it by myself, okay? Because we did a lot of talking back and forth. And it gets quicker and easier the more you do it. But my people on the outside of the fishbowl, share with me very quickly, what are some things you noticed that happened that's going to be beneficial for the students in our planning first? What did we do that's going to truly impact students today?
Go.
She discussed the 4 specific things that they need to work on, so she knows that ahead of time, so that's the focus for the lesson.
Specific vocabulary words,
Mhm.
just words in general they need to be familiar with before they read.
the pacing of the lesson
Mhm.
also is important because
Yeah,
you think you gotta get everything in.
Yeah.
Patience.
Stressing that to incorporate academic language.
Yeah.
Not to shy away from those words.
Mhm.
Not only did she know what they needed, but she knew what they already had,
That's right.
and that's important.
That is very important.
I'm gonna add one more thing on that comprehension piece, that making connections.
Mhm.
That's powerful because
Mhm.
kids need to know
Yeah.
why, you know, and make those connections.
That's right.
Keep them interested.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Anything else? Anybody else noticed? Tell me what was most helpful for you in what we just did. What do you feel like is a takeaway for you just from what we just did this planning?
Well, just when you look at this, I want to make sure that I cover everything. I don't want to do the kids an injustice.
Mhm.
If it's in here, I want to make sure I give it to them.
Mhm.
But I think just sort of that freedom to just sort of pick and choose
Mhm.
what I think is best and know that that's okay,
Mhm.
that makes me feel good.
And you're picking and choosing based on what?
What they need and the prior knowledge of things
That's
that they
right.
already know,
That's
that we
right.
can revisit.
And the goal I've chosen for today. Because the thing I want to make sure, I think you have it, but sometimes communication is a miracle. You know what I'm saying? The thing I want to make sure that you actually help your teachers understand too, as y'all begin to work within the PLCs, is that when you choose a goal, and our goal today is using text and illustrations to build clear understanding of the book. Have we done things throughout the lesson to set up for that? Okay. But we didn't go off on a lot of inferring. We didn't go off on, summarizing throughout the entire story. What I'm trying to say is that those are things those kids can use. But in today's lesson, we're being very specific. Whatever goal we chose, we keep going back to, along with what we know about the kids and what they need as readers. Does that make sense? Because I think that's important too, because if we're not careful, and what happens I think sometimes if we're not careful, is we get to thinking about a lot of these goals,
And they're all
then-
good.
and they're all good goals.
Yes.
But because we're thinking of all these goals, we're trying to teach all of these goals in a lesson, and because we're trying to teach all these goals, the lesson keeps lasting longer and longer and longer. See what I mean? But what you'll find, the more and more you do it, you're gonna see all of these goals throughout many of your books.
Does it just
Okay.
sort of spirals,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Mhm. That's right. So it's not a one-shot fits all.
Gotcha.
Everybody okay with this? Good? All right. So we're ready to go teach here in like 4 minutes, right? Awesome.
Anybody in this restroom?
Here's the guy. She gotta go.
Someone-